Hello, this is our class for April 22nd. Today we're just going to go through a practice run of the project. I'm going to use a different variable than the ones you have available. Basically your instructions are to download this big data file. It's a text file run by the geography folks in the geography or science department. And it's got weather data from the 1930s until now. So I want you to pick a decade from the 1930s, between the 30s and the 2000s. I'm going to use the 90s for this project. And we're going to compare it to the decade plus that goes from 2010 until present. And you need to pick one of the variables I have listed here, the daily low temperature, the daily high temperature, or precipitation. I'm going to use snow for this practice project, just so that I have something different. My graphs are going to be a lot uglier than yours because so many of the days have zero snow, so the number is going to be stacked way up on zero. The graphs will look a lot nicer for temperature or also for precipitation, because there's enough days with rain that you get a decent looking graph. So your first duty is to pick a decade and one of these variables and download this data file. That data file has a whole bunch of data that you aren't going to use. So the second thing that I'm going to do is to try to get rid of all the data I don't need and get it ready to go into Minitab. And I'm going to use Excel to help me clean up that data. You could do that straight in the text file with some kind of, just like a regular text editor, but there's like tens of thousands of rows you're going to have to select and delete, and Excel has some tricks that make that a little bit quicker. So let me open up Excel. So Excel isn't open right now. Well, yeah, Excel is open. Okay, how come I can't open Excel? Show all windows. Okay, can I just show my screen? Okay, for some reason, it's not letting me share my Excel file, so my Excel screen. So I am going to open up the data file in Excel, and then maybe it'll let me share it. Okay, so let me do a new share. Okay, now it's letting me share it. All right, so what I did was I opened up Excel, and under Excel, I just clicked File and Open, and then selected the text file that I had downloaded from the web. And Excel is smart enough to convert that text file to an Excel file that it can understand. Okay, so now I need to delete some of the data I don't need. So all this data from the 30s and 40s all the way up to the 80s, I don't need it. So I want to select and delete all of that. Now, Excel can quickly select a lot of stuff using keyboard commands. So if I hold down the Shift key, so I'm holding Shift now, and I'm going to use right arrow, I can select this whole row. And then if I hit down arrow, I can select big bunches of text. Now the real trick is if I hold Shift and Control plus an arrow jumps you to the end of a block of text. So Shift and Control is going to jump me to the end of the block of text and highlight it. So this gets me all the way down to April 19th, 2020. It selects everything that's there. Now, I don't want to select everything and delete everything. I only want to delete the stuff up until the 90s. So I'm going to find the beginning of the 90s, the end of the 80s here. Okay, 89, August, October, November, December. Okay, so this row here, right, is the last day of the 80s, so December 31st, 1989. So what I'm going to do is select that and hit the delete key on my keyboard to make these blank. There's two ways to delete stuff in Excel. One is to highlight some stuff and hit the delete key on your keyboard. That makes those cells blank. Another is up here on the ribbon. You hit this delete button up here, and that actually makes the entire row disappear. but I actually want these blanks because when I do shift control, it jumps me to the end of a text block. And now the end of the text block is going to be 1989 because this is sort of like a separation that will make it so that the control doesn't jump past there. So let me redo my control shift. I'm just going to highlight the top row with my mouse, and then I'll do shift control and down. And now see it got stopped by that row of blanks. So let me scroll back up to the top. And this time, instead of using the delete key, I actually want all of these rows to go away. I don't want them to just be blank. So this time I'm going to hit delete up on the ribbon. And sure enough, they're just gone. Now in row 5, I'm starting off in 1990. Now in Minitab understands that the top row can be column headers, but then it wants the data to start. So these extra sort of labels and blank rows, I'm going to get rid of those. I'm going to select those 3 rows and hit this delete on the ribbon to make them disappear. So now the top row is column headers, and after that, the data starts. Now there's a bunch of data I need to get rid of after that. I don't need the 2000s because I'm using the 90s. And the other thing that I'm supposed to compare it to is the 2010s. So I'm going to delete the first day of the 2000s and the last day of the 2000s. Okay, so here's the last day of the 2000s, delete. And so now I can highlight all of the 2000s, get rid of them, and I'll just have the 90s and the 2010s. So shift control, and I'll go up because I was already at the bottom. So now I have all the 2000s highlighted. I'll hit delete. Those are gotten rid of. And you can see now, I have to sort of scroll up fast. We're going to be jumping straight from the 90s to the 2010s. Okay, we'll zoom ahead a bit here. Okay, so we have the 90s and then a couple blank rows in the 2010s. Now, Minitab has different ways of distinguishing these data. We want to compare the 90s to the 2010s. So we need a way of separating them. Now, as a human, I'm sort of smart enough to know that the ones that have a 1990 something are the one group, and the ones that have a 20 something are the second group. But Minitab needs a more specific label than that if everything's in the same column. Easier would be to just get the second set of data into separate columns. So I'm going to highlight all of these and just cut and paste. So we'll cut and then paste them over here to the side. We're going to go down a row so that we have room to put in new column headers. So paste all that data over here. Okay, so now I have the 90s over on the left, the 2010s on the right, and I'm using snow as my variable, so I can get rid of these other variables. We'll get rid of these low and high temperatures and this precipitation. So I'm going to highlight them by clicking on the letters at the top of the rows, highlight those, delete. And then snow F, like the column I really need is snow. Snow F is just, these ones mean that this 0 inches, there wasn't enough snow to be 1/10 of an inch, but there was a trace amount of snow, a few flakes fell. That's what that one means, in case you're interested. So I'm not going to pay attention to that. So we'll get rid of the other snow columns. And the last snow column there was snow depth. And so basically if snow accumulates and it takes a while to melt, then the snow D sort of says what's the depth of the current snow. Okay, I think I had one more column there than I needed. All right, and then let's copy over these headers. I should have copied the headers before I deleted so that I was sure I was deleting the right stuff. All right, so I think this is almost ready. There is one last thing that we want to do, and that is I need to clean up this data. See, the way that the geography folks handled their data is they recorded this stuff every day, but some days their instruments screwed up, or for some reason they didn't get a good measurement for that day. And anytime there was a day where that happened, the data box instead of having a reasonable number in it, it has one of these, 9,999.9. So we can't use that data point. We don't know what the actual snowfall was that day. So we are just going to delete that and take it out of our data set. And so you have to go through the whole list and find all of those. Look at that. There's 25.5 inches that day, March 13th, 1993. So we have to go through and find all those instances where the box has a 999 and delete those, or they're going to mess up our data. Interestingly, all of the bad spots in the data that I chose seem to be in the 90s and not the 2010s. So maybe they got better at having their instruments not make mistakes. And I didn't really put much effort into trying to find a clever way to locate these. I figured that it's a pain to scroll through 20,000 rows, but it's not that bad. And you can just go through and delete these spots where you have 999. So there's a little bit of tedium copying this data and then fixing it up, deleting the years you don't need, fixing those 9999s. But that's actually the hard part of the project. Once you have this file cleaned up, you upload it into Minitab and you're basically done. Okay, so we're almost done. We're up to the 90s. And once this is done, you just save it, go into Minitab, and then you open the file from there, and then you're ready to go. So I'm going to do the Minitab business in a second video. So all this data is ready. I think it's ready to go. So we'll just hit save. It's keeping it as a text file, so just keep that in mind. Unless you save it as an Excel file, it's going to keep it as a text file. And so you'll be opening that ship_ob.txt that you have altered in Excel from Minitab, unless you saved it as an Excel file, in which case open the Excel file that you saved. All right, so I'll see you in Minitab in the next video.